Well, thank you everybody for joining us for today's VCIG Live, or VCIGLive as we prefer to call it. It's been a couple of months since our last webcast, so we've got a lot to talk about today. And I am just here to represent the VCI Group board before I turn it over to JD and the rest of the folks for the discussion today. So first of all, I want to thank all of you for showing up. I want to thank our panelists, thank our viewers, and we have a great show in store for you. I want to thank also Zoom Communications for providing the platform for today's broadcast. Thank you, Zoom. And one other group of folks to thank, our VCI Group Alliance members who helped make all this possible. We'll have a slide up shortly with a bunch of their names and logos, or maybe we'll just move on to our discussion. So JD, let me turn it over to you to introduce the panelists, and I will bow out for the time being, and I'll see everybody at the end.
Okay, well, if you see our panelists, let me, Nick Chong, why don't you introduce yourself and who you're with?
Sure, I'm Nick Chong. I'm the head of product marketing here at Zoom. What I do is really related to growth strategy at Zoom, product marketing, as well as to ensure that product features come back to Zoom so we can continue to enhance and improve our services.
And how long have you been in the conferencing collaboration industry, Nick?
I was with Cisco in the emerging technology group for a couple of years, and I joined Zoom 2 years ago. So
Excellent.
It's been the last couple of years.
Excellent. And Ben, can you introduce yourself, who you're with, and how long?
Absolutely. Yeah, so my name is Ben Feynman. I'm a program manager for video services with Internet2, which has a couple of different aspects. I manage the Internet2 video signaling infrastructure that we have deployed nationally, as well as work with a number of cloud service providers, including Nick, to bring cloud video services to our member universities through the Net Plus program. I've been with Internet2 for just about 10 years now, so, well, been not around as long as some folks here, but long enough to see some craziness in my time.
Excellent, excellent. David, introduce yourself. You're with Cleveland Clinic, and you let me know this morning that was not in New York, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Why don't you introduce yourself, David?
Hi, I'm Dave Wolfley. I'm with the Cleveland Clinic. I'm a senior video network engineer, and I'm in charge of a lot of the video conferencing and video streaming here at the Cleveland Clinic. And I've been in the industry somewhere around almost 30 years, different edges of video conferencing. I've been with the clinic about 4 years.
Wow. So we're going to start, gentlemen. We're going to talk a little bit about what's happening in your organization, what you're doing about interoperability. And like a lot of these conference calls, they don't go like you think they're going to go. We expected to have some slides up already. I'm sure that'll pop up here in a minute, maybe. Or maybe not, Theo.
JD, let me just bounce back for just a moment to mention that we want to keep this session as interactive as possible with all of our viewers. So get on Twitter, use the hashtag VCIGLive or pound VCIGLive to submit questions or broadcast your thoughts. We'll be monitoring that, so help us out here with what you want to hear. Back over to you, JD.
Okay, so Carl's got us up on screen sharing. Let's talk about connecting outside our organization. And gentlemen, I'm going to go around the table here a little bit. And what are the requirements in your organization for connecting outside and inside? Ben, you want to talk about that a little bit at Internet2?
Yeah, so Internet2 represents the research and education community for the U.S. And so, as you might know, a big part of academics and research is working with other people. And a lot of those other people happen to be at other organizations. So interinstitutional calling is a big requirement for higher education. That said, the other side of that coin is that higher education faculty are very intolerant of failures or things that get in the way of their teaching and research missions.
I'm shocked
so,
to hear that.
I know it's a revelation to everyone here. But so we have to balance that requirement in such a way that the technologies are highly reliable and easy to use while still being infinitely flexible.
So if you've got one institution talking to another institution, they have different endpoints, different networks, different everything. Do you find it necessary then to use transcoding capabilities, cloud capabilities, a third party? I mean, is it something you really got to think about because it's not normal, it's not natural, or is it part of your natural way you do business?
So it's definitely a natural fit in terms of embracing standards-based interoperable solutions. And historically, that's the way we've approached the problem. Today, you know, the game is shifting a little bit in terms of these cloud solutions now have the capability to send a link and people can join the meeting by clicking a link without even invoking their existing video capabilities. So,
right.
You know, how that affects interoperability and the motivation to pursue interoperability is a really interesting dynamic.
Oh, it is indeed. So, David, talk to us a little bit about your requirements. What percentage of your calls are inside the organization versus outside, David? You're on mute, David.
We do a lot of calls inside. We do a lot of calls. We do between 180 and 200 calls a month.
Right.
Out of those 200 calls, between 40 and 50% of them involve an outside call, someone calling into our network from outside. Some of them are for interviews. Some of them are for something like medical grand rounds where we have, you know, do a lot of education type things. Mm-hmm. And so we have had to learn to pretty much learn to talk to any standards-based other system, and we're also just getting into cloud-based solutions, such as you know, video or Zoom or something like that.
So who drives your requirements there, David? I mean, driven by the doctors? Is it driven by your internal organization?
We're driven by our physicians who need to communicate, by our administration who may have a business meeting, or, you know, we're driven by the fact that we have facilities all the way off site, like over in Abu Dhabi in the Middle East. We have facilities other places in the nation, other healthcare providers, as distance health. You know, I think the patient drives what we need, what we do, as well as the physicians and the institutions.
Got it. So let me ask this question, guys, all of you, and then I'm going to ask Nick this question too. Seems to me we've had a lot of discussion in VCIGLive around bring your own device. My end user wants to bring my device. He's decided this is what he uses to communicate with. I mean, is it our responsibility? And we've had diverging opinions on this from our membership. Some members say we have to respond to our constituency, period. Others say we have to define a policy and say as long as your endpoint or your device fits into these criteria and applications, we'll support it. What do you favor there, Ben? I mean, if I bring any device, should I be able to use it on the internet too?
Absolutely, and you know, this is a huge topic for universities. Obviously, students are coming to campuses with any number of devices, and that gets us into IP address space depletion and IPv6. But that's not the topic of this call. But yes, it's certainly a requirement to integrate those devices into a collaboration platform. Now, the way that plays out in reality is interesting. The student has a smartphone and maybe they want that to be their primary communication platform, but that's not going to have that's not going to be the optimal experience to do distance learning. Sitting through a 90-minute class and viewing the lecturer on your smartphone is not going to give you the optimal experience. And so both empowering the students, but also, helping them achieve the best experience by guiding them to the appropriate tools for the appropriate applications is a big part of the challenge.
How about for you, David?
Yeah, one of the things that drives we have to be flexible. We have, you know, whether it's the doctor who wants to watch a webcast on his iPhone, you know, on the way into work or something like that, or it's the grand rounds that we have to get to Abu Dhabi.
So I have a picture, David. Just a second, I have a picture. So the doctor's driving to work, got his iPhone, driving his Porsche, watching some sort of show, right?
Well, sometimes that has happened, and they've actually used.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
They've used their iPhones actually to also broadcast. You know, when we did one education course where we had doctors and physicians in 3 different parts of the country in the world.
Right. Right.
So I think the ability to be flexible and bring your own device is critical in the world that we're in today.
Absolutely. So Nick, tell me, what kind of role has Zoom played in dealing with this issue of bring your own device, in the issue of making sure organizations can communicate internally as well as externally?
Right. So, so two things. First of all, the role of enterprises and the IT has really changed in the probably the last 2 or 3 years, right? In the past, there used to be a set of things that the IT said, here are the things that you can do, here are how you schedule your conferencing, here are the rooms you can go to. So it was sort of an environment where it's truly protected, you know, there are rules and regulations around that, policies around that. But the shift has really shifted to now the enterprises is becoming more like an app store, right, itself. So you have a variety of choices. You can come in and use the variety of apps. You bring your own devices. The IT has become an app store. You can call it, you can schedule your own meeting. You can join from any device, from any room systems, and then you can set it up on your own basis. So it sort of moved to the environment of what I think JD have mentioned before, the self-service model. It has to be easy, high quality self-service, and can scale easily, given that the dynamics have changed to sort of a BYOD, as well as a, you know, set up your conferencing at any time sort of strategy. Now, given that the industry has shifted, there must be a solution to be able to solve that requirement. So Zoom has tried to introduce that in a basis. We try to bring out a solution whereby you have a BYOD environment, you have a more sophisticated end user that can do their own scheduling, set up their own meeting, talk to anyone at any time, bring in rooms, bring in devices. So that's why the prevalence of cloud-based solutions coming in at this point.
So this is a place where you started to really thrive, is people having to have that flexibility, the ability to talk to any application and or device. Now, I heard this from some of our members and some of our other VCIGLive, where folks say, we're not going to define the endpoint, we'll just define the applications. And that way, if the device fits this set of requirements, feel free to use it. Is that what you do, Ben?
Yeah, and so, you know, that goes to an interesting aspect of BYOD that I actually call BYOC. So bring your own codec. So for historically, video conferencing has been focused on these dedicated room systems, right? But at the end of the day, that the high quality experience that is enabled through these dedicated systems is facilitated by the big displays, the nice cameras, and the nice echo canceling conference room microphones. The codec itself is irrelevant. Our computers can easily do the job that the codec is doing. So we're seeing an interesting trend with BYOC that universities are setting up these huddle stations where users can bring in their laptops, fire up whatever client they want, could be Zoom, could be something else, but then have the ability to plug it into the conference room essentially and have that full-blown immersive experience just using the laptop as a codec. So, you know, in the future, I see that going to the smartphone as smartphones become more powerful. And you just wirelessly connect to the capabilities in the room and go from there. So I agree that it's about the application. It's not about the devices.
JD, you're muted.
I stunned him into silence.
Are you shocked and appalled? By the way, folks, the biographies and the background of all of our panelists you'll find in the recording at vciglive.org. So when you go to our website, you'll find this. By the way, this will be recorded as well. You'll find the biographies on Nick, Ben, David, and myself. So let's talk about defining and communicating the policy. I talked to a couple of you guys earlier in the week, and you said you really don't have a defined policy. It kind of like evolves and defines itself on a regular basis. David, am I paraphrasing that right? Is that what you told me?
Yeah, that's basically the way it happens. I mean, we don't have a hard set, here's what you can do and here's the devices we do, because if we started to say, you know, you can only communicate via room systems, we would limit a lot of our communication.
Right.
And we find we can't do that.
Well, let's back up a little bit. When you open it up like that, okay, and I've been doing a little consulting for a cloud security company. What happens to security when you open it up like that? Do you also take greater risks for having people get on your network? And how do you balance that, Ben?
So, yeah, historically, higher education has not been as concerned with security, and it's more about collaboration and everything being open. Unfortunately, that the world has changed, and even universities recognize security is important. So that's absolutely where the back-end video infrastructure comes into play that facilitates these seamless interinstitutional interactions in a world where universities are secure behind firewalls, maybe behind network address translation, things like that. So that's one of the main barriers that still exist today in terms of folks that are trying to use standards-based room systems without the supporting infrastructure. And they just dial by IP address because there's no better option available. And first thing they do is they hit the firewall at the other end and either can't connect the calls or get one-way video and audio, or it ends up being a bad time. So
Right.
One of the things we have in higher ed is an overarching dialing scheme to bring together those infrastructure elements that facilitate telephone-style dialing for video endpoints in a secure world.
Got it. So Nick, it seems to me that a lot of us kind of think it goes like this with security. We trade flexibility and we trade ubiquity. We give that up and we take on more security. Or the more security we take on, the less open we are. Is that true when a cloud company like Zoom does it, or do you guys handle that differently and provide some other level of security? How do you address that issue at Zoom?
So it is a good question, right? The truth is there are many layers of security that has to be addressed in the scheme of a conversation, right? First of all, there's communication security. That itself is quite important. Now, in the past, 323 has come out with the encryption protocol, etc., to allow to do that. So that itself is in place. And then with PC-based or TCP-based communications, most of the time is communicated over SSL. So that ensures a level of encryption as well. So that's at the communication level. The second piece is at the application level. Right now, we're doing a call here is an application level. You can also encrypt the application itself with AES 128 to do that. And that is quite important at the application layer. So you're doing it at the communications layer, then at the application layer. The third is a physical layer, right? I mean, you and I are right now on the meeting. So for example, right now, we want this to be closed door. We have two ways to do it. We can lock it with a passcode. We can also lock the meeting. We're in the meeting right now. We can just lock the meeting. No one else can come into this meeting and secure that as well, okay? Then lastly, the last one is around sort of the functions of like recording, because there are implications of recording. What does it do? How do you do that? How do you maintain the privacy of this recording? So the multi-layer related security that must be addressed. It's not a one thing, but you got to be able to look at it from a holistic approach. And what are the policies, and how do you get all those pieces in place to be secure? And one thing we've done well, I used to run security at Cisco as well. So we ensure from a Zoom perspective, all those layers are addressed to ensure a high secure communications when you're doing it.
So if I'm thinking about reaching out to a cloud services company, maybe Zoom, because I use you guys like 4 or 5 times a day, and I love the price, great price point. So I would immediately think I have to give up security if I'm going to use a cloud services company. What you're telling me is that's not the case. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's not the case at all. Everything from a cloud perspective is completely secure, and you have, again, I said, communications, applications, and in-meeting securities.
Got it. Now,
and JD, I just want to jump in, because this is something we run into in the Net Plus program all the time, is the inherent perception that cloud services are less secure, and it's really not the case. And we have a very detailed vetting process that each of our cloud service partners goes through in every time they're able to meet the requirements. And it's not just security but compliance that our universities are concerned about, in terms of there's this perception that anything in the cloud is going to completely screw up your HIPAA and your FERPA and all that good stuff. And that's not the case either. I mean, don't get me wrong, HIPAA is a big pain in the rear, but you can certainly use cloud services and still be in compliance with those types of issues.
Do you have anything written up that we could send to our membership that that explains that, or anything? You guys have any kind of written document, Ben, or can we reach out to you and quote you? Because we'd like to get that information out to our membership.
Happy to reach out to me directly. I don't think we've written up a white paper on that specific compliance document, but yeah, that's a good suggestion.
Cool. Then
But,
we'll ask one more folks to reach out to you. So,
Yeah,
so folks, we got a Twitter question.
Sorry,
Listen,
Jay.
go ahead.
We do have a HIPAA compliance paper on our website, as well as the security documents, as well as the outline security.
Great. If you'll send me a copy of the link, I'll make sure it goes out to the membership. So gentlemen, here's a comment from one of our listeners, our attendees. It's a comment via Twitter. Now, I'm going to laugh like hell when I read this, okay? Now, for those of you that know my background, I started in the conferencing industry in 1988. I've never heard this question before. And it's a quote from Ken. I won't use his last name. Video conferencing needs to be easy, dependable, flexible, and cost-effective. Most do not meet all of these items simultaneously. Duh. Ken, I don't want to embarrass you, but that's a question that's been going on forever. Forever. We had 6 guys on a video call the other day, Nick. 6. And if you added up all of our time in the industry, engineers, executives, etc., I mean, we've all been at Picturetel, Polycom, done some work with Cisco, been in the MCU business. There were 6 of us, probably have 150 years of experience. Took us 22 minutes to get all online. And it wasn't because we didn't know what we were doing. There were so many variables, so many choices. The settings for our audio, settings for our speakers. You know, once we got that all together, we were all communicating. But absolutely, you're right, Ken. It does need to be all those things, especially if we're going to allow non-experts to use our technology to the maximum. Carl, let's go to the next slide. Current state of interop. This is, and I gave you a little story of 6 of us all trying to get on the call at the same time. To kind of say, we all have those kinds of experiences. Also, I believe that with a number of our clients, we have given them training on the protocol and the manners, the way you engage, the courtesy in a video call. For example, one of the things we've given one of our clients is this: never hold a video call with someone that has not practiced first. So on all the meetings, they have to have practiced and launched the application. So there's some strategy and there's some use. Let's talk about the strategy for inter and intra organizations. Strategy and rules seems to me, and you guys can comment, and I know this is difficult with doctors because we all know doctors think they're in the wrong job. They really are God. So, I mean, how do you tell a doctor about the appropriate kinds of courtesy, protocol, how to do something? How do you get that communicated in a way that it takes hold? David, is that a difficult task?
It has to be simple for doctors. I mean, again, if they can click a link, or they expect it, you know, they walk in a room and it's ready and it's connected. They don't care what went on behind the scenes to make it connect. They just want it to connect then. You know, they want it to be there when they get there. So if we ask them to use an app, it has to be as simple as clicking a button on their iPhone, dialing a number, and they're connected. Or clicking, even better, to click a link, whether it's a Zoom link, whether it's a video link, whether it's, you know, Polycom Real Presence, or Jabber, or, you know, you name the client that you'd like to use. It's got to be easy for them, or otherwise they're going to have people like staff that has to be in the background connecting and making it a lot harder on the staff in the background. But again, they're not going to take the time to learn it, or to, you know, be 22 minutes into a call and we've pretty much lost the support of that call has failed. So
tell me, do you have a training kind of program? Do you have something where they can go to and be trained before a call, or just by on the job training kind of thing? I mean, how do they use it?
We do an in-service mostly with their admins, their administrative assistants and things like that. Mm-hmm. We offer training on a regular basis. They can contact anybody on our staff and we will walk them through it. We also have a scheduling process today that the admin goes through in order to make the call get scheduled.
Got it.
We have a few people that have instant meeting rooms where they originate the call instead of us having to schedule it for them. But a lot of our calls are scheduled still.
Got it. So So Ben, do you have any kind of training for your member organization on how to connect, or this is something they do internally themselves?
Oh yeah, we've done lots of, we generally don't train end users. We train site coordinators and video engineers, and we actually have a workshop on real-time collaboration coming up in conjunction with the Internet 2 Global Summit. So I'll plug that. But the broader point I want to make here is that one of the reasons that video conferencing has not taken off is because it has been too hard, and it does require training. And we can give users trainings, and if they're motivated enough, they'll figure out how to do it. But it's not enough to keep them there. And eventually they're just like, this isn't worth the hassle, and I'm just going to go use Skype because Skype's really easy. And that's how Skype got, 500 million users or however many they have nowadays. And so if we want the higher quality video solutions to really be able to compete against the Skypes of the world, they need to be dead simple. And we're moving in that direction, but it's not an easy task, especially when we're talking about interoperability and calling interorganizationally in between vendor solutions and all that good stuff. But we need to make the video endpoints as easy to dial, either as easy as the phone or as easy as clicking on a link. One of those two things. Users can handle that. Likewise, the user they have to not have to configure the room system. Using this is a non-starter for most end users. If they have to figure out how to aim the camera, you're already done. The camera either needs to aim itself or not need to be aimed. And those are just a couple of the many barriers to end user adoption in terms of ease of use. But we've got to get there if we want to compete against the proprietary, inflexible solutions like Skype. Got it.
Nick, you want to comment on a strategy, defining a strategy and communicating it, and how we empower our users? You want to talk a little bit about that and how Zoom facilitates that?
Yeah, so that is a very important factor. Right now, we have around 15,000 businesses right now, almost 1,000 universities that are running on Zoom. And two things we have learned, right? One is that acquiring the technology is easy, but how do you then get and deliver that and communicate the technology, the process, and the whole things to the user base? So we've come up with an onboarding process. So we work with our customers as well as our educational users on an onboarding process. That involves some communications, a little bit of a training, and sort of a role-playing environment as well to sort of have them go through the onboarding environment. The good news is that in the past, with other technologies we've seen, it takes quite a bit of time to go to onboarding. With us, it's around a 15 minutes process to onboard, and pretty much they're done. And we can do it in big groups as well. The other piece around the strategies and ongoing process is how do you provide a feedback mechanism back to the process? Because like any other environment, like Ben mentioned it right, in universities, there's so many use cases and they keep changing on a day-to-day basis. How do you get that feedback back to the process so you can redefine your next strategy and how to enable that? That's quite key. So we'll help them build a back-end process as well to have the process back to them and then back to us as well.
So I got a comment here from another attendee said, video conferencing users should not be forced to adapt their needs to the solution. The solution should adapt to the needs of the users. I don't think anybody will disagree with that, right? Yeah, I mean, thanks, Ken, Mom, apple pie, I mean, absolutely. Nobody can disagree with that. However, as we all know, we've lagged behind in this area for some time. But it sounds to me like in your organizations, David, Ben, and what you're facilitating, Nick, is this thing is moving awfully. I mean, we're moving rapidly into the place where the user is empowered to make the decisions for themselves.
Absolutely.
But with that comes some rules. For example, whether it be a video or audio call, I'm damn tired of a user coming on, not muting, and over here vacuuming or something. I'm damn tired of a user, you know what I mean, where they put us on hold and we hear some music and it destroys the meeting for a while. There's a part of this that says, if you're going to have conferences, video, audio, even a regular meeting, plan it, control it, direct it, move it rapidly down the road, because it's not going to handle itself. You're not going to have everybody in the room. And I think one of the things we failed to realize is when we do a collaboration conference, it may require 10% more time to plan, organize, and control it. So what takes place is real productivity gain. So let's move on to the strategy of point-to-point and multi-point. What do you mean the lines are fuzzy? Who said that yesterday?
I don't know. One of us probably did.
One of us. Well, here's where I see multi-point. Having been in the multi-point space, it seems to me that somewhere around 75 to 80% of all video conferencing calls are more than two people. But also seems like when I'm just calling another location, let's say assume this for a moment. Let's assume I'm a new user and I've got video conferencing loaded here on my PC. I've got it loaded and I just decide I want to call one of my clients somewhere else. Do I have to know certain kinds of things or can I just do that?
Hey JD, this is Theo. I think I remember what I think the fuzzy comment was mine, and that came out of the discussion that with products like Zoom, for instance, the difference between a multi-way and a point-to-point connection, there's really no difference. It's just inviting another person. Whereas previously, if you're using an H323 system, a point-to-point versus a multi-point makes a big difference. You got to have a bridge involved. Some organizations, and I think David, you may have mentioned that even some point-to-point connections you have going through your bridge, and I think that's where that conversation came from.
Right. Well,
so let me comment on that real quick. In terms of, I would characterize this question not so much as point-to-point versus multi-point as a push versus pull question. And hear me out for a minute. So with point-to-point versus multi-point, in the end, you're getting a group of people together. Let's say it's only two people. If they're both calling into a conference bridge, then everything is great, and you don't have to worry about interoperability for the most part because the conference bridge is taking care of it and working its magic like Zoom is doing for us today. In that, for the most part, solves the pull scenario, where groups of people are all calling into a central point. But for the push scenario, where let's say I want to call, my coworker, and I want to call them directly. I don't want to send them an email and say, "Hey, meet me in this online meeting room when you get around to it." I want to actually call them, and that's where interoperability becomes really important. And that's the point where our community still has not achieved critical mass with solutions that are interoperable, vendor neutral, and have common dialing plans.
Got it. Well, this evolution to cloud services, you think that's brought about by multi-point, Theo?
I think I can agree with all that.
David, what about you? The evolution of cloud services, do you think that has more to do with being multi-point, or do you think it has more to do with transcoding?
I think it has to do with both. I mean, cloud services like Zoom allow us to sidestep the interoperability issue by having a central bridge that works magic for the interop portion. And today that gets us into a much better position than we historically have been in the past. Now, all I'm trying to say today is that I don't think it's the end game. It's an important piece of the puzzle, but that doesn't mean that interoperability is no longer important.
No, I think it is. I think we have to be interoperability. We have to be interoperable. We have to be able to, I think cloud access is, video through the cloud is what's going to drive us in the future. We need to be able to click on the link and at the same time connect with our old room system, or click on the link and I'm on my mobile device, or, my colleague's on his mobile device. It's unified communication. It's connecting anywhere, anyway, whatever works. If it's just a matter of even a phone call. But I think that we need to, the cloud is certainly opening the door, and whether it's multi-point driven or single point, I think it's driven by both.
So I want to chime in here for a minute on this one. So the premise of interoperable is important from a technology point of view, right? That they can talk, they can call each other point to point and multi-point. It is important. However, from the end user perspective, that's not their issue. Their issue is, how do I get to be able to call back one-to-one, or be able to call Ben, David, and JD as a group in the shortest amount of time? That's the end user point of view, right? So from a backend, the interoperable pieces are key. But from a user perspective, you just got to be able to solve it in a simple and a reliable and quality way for them to do that. Now, there are two methods of solving that. One method is that all these endpoints have an interoperable protocols among themselves that they can call each other's point-to-point or multi-point. That can be achieved, but we've tried that for the last 15 or 20 years, and it's taken a long, long, long time, and it's still not there. The second solution is to do it whereby you have a cloud service that can touch all these endpoints and allow them to point to multi-point around them, and also essentially point to point to another. This is an example. There's no reason why Ben is on a 3-to-3 can register to a directory in the Zoom cloud, and then from me here, just call Ben and have a point-to-point call to him. From his point, it's a point-to-point call, and it's interoperable, even though there's a translation between them in the cloud. Likewise, when people are calling in, they call into a multi-point bridge number, and they call into that. If you can do those two things right, then it's interoperable without having to burden a lot of the end user side or waiting for a lot of the transitions to happen at the endpoint. That's just my point of view.
So you would think, down to one of our points, that the growth and evolution of cloud services has a lot to do with this interoperability issue.
That's right.
Okay. Well, makes sense. I mean, you folks are growing right and left. I see this happening. Let me ask this question though. Let me just set up a tough scenario. Let's say I've got an endpoint that uses Link. I've got an endpoint that uses video. I've got an endpoint that uses Spontanea, and I've got an endpoint that uses Polycom. Do you think I'll have any problems being interoperable in a multi-point environment with those guys if I don't go through a service?
I think you might as well go home, JD.
Yeah, you're going to have some kind of cloud or interoperability there. I don't see anybody.
Well, so not only do you need to have a cloud solution, you need to have a cloud solution that has individual partnerships that facilitate proprietary interoperability, because many of the solutions you named are not standards-based, or at least not with open standards. So to get them all together in the same room, somebody's going to have to do those deals on the side.
That's right.
Does that mean that okay, let's say I'm an engineer on this call and I'm listening in. Does that mean I decide on one vendor all the time? Does that help me or not?
It helps you.
Does it?
Yeah, but it also limits you.
Got it.
Well, and so that's what I was talking about, how cloud bridging services enable us to sidestep that whole interoperability problem. Saying, all right, you have Link, you have video, you have this, you have that. Forget about all that. Just click this link and we'll use, today, we'll use the Zoom client. And you can all join the call together, which is great and gets us a lot farther than we were in the past. And, in the past, if people had all those things, they just couldn't talk to each other. And so, we've come a long way. But I still say that's sidestepping the question and sidestepping the root of the issue, which is that those endpoints can't call each other because they're each proprietary. So we're a lot better off than we were, but we're still not all the way there.
Yeah, it's choosing one vendor for the day more than choosing one vendor. Everybody has to go by my one vendor.
Got it. At the end of the session here, we'll also give everyone an opportunity to submit their interoperability requirements, because this is a major move on part of VCIG. We're driving the interoperability issues along with a number of other organizations. Let's go to the last slide here, Carl. So I've got another comment from Ken. He said video conferencing needs to be as easy and dependable as flipping on a light switch. I'll agree with that. Mom and apple pie. I think cloud services come about because we want to be able to connect from anywhere at any time from anything. Yeah, probably true. Doesn't sound to me like there's any secrets there. Thanks, Ken, for sharing. Now, what keeps you up? By the way, if you're sitting there with your Twitter and you see our questions, if you've got your own stuff that keeps you awake at night, tweet those over and we'll talk to those. So let's ask this question. I think this is a softball here, but let's ask it anyway. How do I prepare for the ongoing change? So now you've empowered your users. You've got to respond and react to new endpoints, applications. You're like an app store now, guys. That's what I heard, right? You're an app store, is that right? So how do you prepare for ongoing change that happens all the time. We've heard some of our attendees in the past say, well, I've set up some guidelines and say, if you have an endpoint that meets these criteria, you're welcome to use it. That's one way. Another way, say if you use these applications, you can use it. But how do you prepare for this ongoing change? Do you communicate a policy, or is just the way you behave relative to your constituency? Ben?
So I'd say this is a nice way to loop back to cloud services in terms of, that technology is rapidly changing, more rapidly today than ever before. And when universities are running their own services, the onus is on them to keep up with it. Cloud services changes that paradigm. If I'm a university and I subscribe to a cloud video conferencing service like Zoom, then suddenly the onus to keep up with change has been shifted to Nick. Sorry, Nick. But I can be reasonably assured that Zoom is going to be doing its darndest to keep evolving their service to remain competitive. And if they don't remain competitive, I haven't made a capital investment, so I'm just stuck with whatever switching costs I have to move my users to a new service. So cloud services are a great boon for universities in enabling them to prepare for ongoing change.
So Nick, we're going to be fickle on you now. So if you don't, so we're going to rely on you, people like you, to maintain the ability to change and shift. And so if you don't do that, we'll go out with another girl. You know that, don't you?
Yes, I got it.
Okay, so you took us into the second question here too, Ben. How do I deal with financial constraints? Is this one of the ways to arbitrage our expenses, so to speak, using cloud services?
Yeah, absolutely. And that, one of the interesting shifts is that it changes it from a capital expenditure to an operational expenditure. And so you're still spending money. You're spending it in a different way, but on the whole, yeah, it's going to cost less because cloud services enable service delivery in a more efficient way. And so that is, another way to help address financial constraints.
And we've heard today that it's also secure, because Nick addressed that. We're staying on the edge, the cutting edge, so we can be the facilitator for interoperability. We've also, as David said, as we let the doctors or the users empower them. So let's say I'm Polycom or I'm video, David, and I come in and say, this new development we have will talk to everything. You just need to stay with me because we have the interop issue nailed. We've got it nailed. Do you believe him?
No. I usually want to.
Come on.
I want to prove it because even when we do prove it, there's still usually issues. You can get close, and one of the challenges that somebody in my role comes up with, if you say, okay, bring anything, you've got to support 3 different, 4 different, 5 different platforms. Right. So you've got one thing for your room system, one thing for your desktop, and so. It's going to be a lot easier for me to have one vendor, but I also need to have them prove it or to understand how they say it's going to interrupt.
And the user doesn't care what brand name's on there, right? I mean, the user can care less, right?
Right. The user just wants to click on the link.
iPad, he probably cares. I mean, these Mac people are just, they're rabid. I mean, if you're a Mac guy, you're a Mac guy, right? You're an Apple person, right? I mean, those people, they're a little weird, excluding them. Normally, except for the individual devices, the end user doesn't care. Just make it work, right?
Right.
Got it. So,
all they're going to want to do is click on the link. In the background, you as somebody who's supporting it is going to want something that's simple for you. So you may standardize on Polycom or Cisco or Zoom, but you're going to want to have something like Zoom or video that interops or that you can go to for those users who are not directly connected to your enterprise or your type.
Well, I must tell you, Nick, I've got 7 different desktop applications, and when I'm talking to people that don't know anything about video, I found using Zoom is one quick and easy way to get them indoctrinated. You guys have really made it easy to use. And I'll expect my payment in the mail tomorrow. Thank you very much. Okay, so how do we remain flexible enough? We've talked about the cloud can do that, but part of it I think is this too. We've heard this over and over and over. Whatever my policy, I need to be able to communicate to my users whatever they want to bring to the table they can, as long as it meets these criteria. Have we communicated to the field what those criteria are? Do you do that, Nick? Do you communicate to your users, we'll let anything talk to anything as long as you fit these criteria? Or do you say bring anything?
There are some system guidelines, right? I mean, not, I mean, yeah, from a overall message is around in any device, but there are some guidelines to the device, right? It has to have enough power, has to have enough connectivity, it has to be somewhat of a newer, OS as well, right? That's updated. So there are some requirements, and that has to be communicated. We provide that on our website as well as on our communications to our customers.
Ben, how do you communicate that to your users? And David, do you say fit these criteria, or we support these devices?
I think our organization says we support these devices.
Got it. David?
And so, yeah, universities are a mixed bag, but yeah, in the end, they need to be as flexible as possible because they're beholden to both their students and the desires of their faculty.
Okay, so cloud services, the ongoing change. Do you think any of our folks in our industry that have been here for 10 or 12 years are getting more anxious about change and how they control all this stuff going on? Or are they just kind of like, okay, it's okay? I mean, let's be real, guys. If you're a telecommunications manager, a video conferencing manager, nobody got promoted for doing the right stuff, but they sure as hell got fired for doing the wrong stuff, right? Right? I mean, is that the way it works in our industry? So as far as I'm concerned, most of the video conferencing engineers I've ever talked to feel like there's a lot more pressure on them today. They have to be much more responsive, and they have a lot less control. Do you think that's true? Nick, you're saying yes.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell from our customers' base perspective. Right now, the good news is the follow, right? For example, we have a university right now. They have about 30,000 people running on this, and only one support person. And the person is able to get this fully deployed across the campus with one person. So we have been able to help in the process, but it is quite a bit of pressure because the requirements are changing, the use cases are changing, the devices are changing, the policies are changing, and it is quite a bit. Yeah.
What percentage of your calls do you think, Ben, go off without a hitch?
Across the entire university community, boy, I would hate to hazard a number, but I'm sure there are many that succeed, and there are still many today that fail. I would argue that one of the things that we have going for us in the Internet 2 community is our network. So that at least takes the network, for the most part, out of the equation in terms of packet loss, latency, and jitter on the calls. So we don't have calls failing for the most part because of a failure in the network. But where we do see failures is always with the dialing, and that goes back to the interoperability and the lack of a dialing plan.
Got it. David, what percentage of your calls go off without a hitch?
Again, I hate to say exactly, but I would say that over 80% of them happen without any issues, or even maybe even a little bit higher. Probably, less than 5% have issues, but they're key issues, or they're with key clients.
Got it. Well, there's an interop organization too. Many of you may not know about that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We're a big part of the interop group. It's a group that communicates to manufacturers, cloud service providers, to facilitate this interoperability. It's a big focus for VCIG. It's one of the initiatives we're driving in the industry. And if you'd like to know more about interoperability, what we're doing about it, how you can play that role, and how we can support you, go to our website and at VCIGLive, or excuse me, VCIG.org. And you might want to take a look at our membership, because our members get free training and certification, as well as interoperability opportunity to help shape that and mold that. Let's move to the next slide and talk a little bit more. Gentlemen, while I'm going to talk to Theo a little bit, I'd ask you to prepare some closing comments about what you'd like our audience to know and remember about interop today when we come back around. Carl, why don't you move me now to the next slide?
And that's my cue. Thank you very much. I just wanted to say thank you to every one of our panelists, Nick, Ben, and David. Thank you so much. JD, thank you for doing your hosting job as par excellence, as usual. But I want to say thank you to everyone who joined as a viewer today for the interactivity we had with folks on Twitter. That's great. I want to mention a couple things before we close. One is, just to reiterate what JD said, please join the VCI group if you're not already a member. The cost is minimal, $99 a year, and we provide a huge service to this industry as the voice of end users and end users who are demanding interoperability. There was one of the last tweets here that I saw that touched on this, was that video communications needs to be as simple as a phone. And again, we've been saying that for years. And I don't probably need to say anything more about that. Yes, it needs to be as simple as a phone. Carl, if you head on to the next slide. Coming up next month for VCIGLive, we have a very special episode for you. Kiss my codec, I'm Irish.
Just a second, you can't say, hey, this is public television. You can't say kiss my codec.
Tune in next month. Watch for some more details on this as the next couple of weeks go by. This is going to be a great session. I may even take my laptop down to the river there, just a couple blocks away from my office, unless the polar vortex comes back, which who knows what it will.
Does the river turn green on St. Patty's Day in Chicago?
It does. It does. Quite a sight, and it is as brilliant and lime green as. Even more so, I kind of toned it down in this picture here.
Well, Faith and we're be looking forward to seeing you next month. We would.
But we not only have this coming up next, we've got a couple of other events coming up. Carl, if you hit the next screen, we've got a special edition of VCIGLive coming up just in a week or so. On March 4th, in our continued drive for interoperability in our industry, through Compass Solutions, we have a class coming up on March 4th. This is just a short teaser of the class, touching on visual communications, interoperability, getting a little bit further into some of the details, the nuts and bolts of what we were talking about today. But later on, and I believe it is May, is the class that you can sign up for that you have to pay a little bit of money for. VCIG members are going to pay less than non-VCIG members. But Tuesday, March 4th, you'll get a taste of what that class is going to be about. That's free. So please register for that. The registration is already live on the vci-group.org website. What JD was mentioning, our interoperability focus, our drive is leading us to an August event. I just noted that the dates are, I believe, 11th, 12th, and 13th in August for VC Directions at IT Expo. Submit your interoperability requests at the URL here on this page. JD, back to you.
Well, folks, go to the next slide if you would, Carl. Nick, Ben, and David, really appreciate your time. I want to take a couple of minutes here if you would and just kind of wrap up with, if you have to leave our audience with one statement about interoperability, what would it be, David?
I would say that interoperability is crucial for our industry. We have to be able to communicate any way, anywhere with whoever we need to, with our clients.
Got it. Ben?
I will say that interoperability has greatly benefited from the advent of cloud solutions. Internet 2 is a huge supporter of cloud services. We're working with providers including Zoom, BlueJeans, Video, Fuse, and Civo to deliver these cloud services to our members. And we believe that today this is the best way to move video communications forward. While also remembering that in the future, we need to keep vendors accountable to endpoint interoperability so that we don't have to retreat to individual vendor islands.
Got it. Good point. That's a great segue for you, Nick, to wrap us up.
Thank you, guys. So first of all, I want to thank all of you guys for joining in. And one thing I do want to mention, Zoom was first started when we met with the guys at VCIG back about 2 years ago. And I've learned so much from that. And that's how our product has evolved. So thank you. And then with the customers with BAN, Internet 2 customers, we have, like I said, thousands of those, and they've taught us so much. And the biggest question, you say, right, how do you make probably, a back burner by just providing the technology and the access? So I do want to thank you. And we'll continue to strive to do that, and we'll work with all of you and our customers as well to achieve that goal.
Great. Thanks, folks. And let me just wrap this up. Join the VCI group. We're the knowledge sharing community that influences visual communications, training, interoperability. We're hopefully helping make this industry and driving at some of the goals we talked about, making this as easy to use as a telephone. That's one of our goals, and keeping our membership informed, ready, trained, and prepared. Folks, thank you for joining us. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Theo. You folks have a nice day, and remember, you can connect to this session at the VCIGLive VCIG group website. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.